What is up, everybody? It is the Burn, and we have a nice little special for you tonight that we're going to get right into. And let me introduce to you Mr. Jordan Van Deaver. How is it going, man?
It's going good. We just came off of really good football games today.
What was your favorite game of the day?
Oh, it's got to be that Penn State game. Defense
Penn-
was electric.
Yeah, that Penn State game, I mean, it really ended up the way I thought it was going to. But I will have to apologize to everybody. The live stream just did not want to get going, but we're going now. So chime in with the comments whenever you guys have something to say, because we're going to cover all of the games. We're going to cover the Notre Dame Indiana game from last night. And boy, there was some reaction to that one. We're also going to be going over the games of today, and we might even touch on a little bit Chiefs, because I know everybody just absolutely loves the Chiefs. But welcome back into the very first The Burn podcast live, and we are presented to you by Hot Zone Sports. If you are not following us, what are you doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe, hit that follow button, because we are for the people, by the people, and with the people. Remember, our show is wherever you get your podcasts too. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify. So if you could rate and review us, we would really appreciate that. And if you are watching on YouTube, first off, congratulations. You finally found us. Secondly, subscribe to the show. Hit that notification bell so you always know when our content drops. So the first game of the weekend was the Indiana Hoosiers and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And if any of you watched the previous episode that we dropped on Friday, actually, it was Thursday night, but it dropped on Friday because the live stream decided not to work. But if you watched any remnant of the podcast, you would know that I am a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, and you would know that I predicted the Irish to win. You know, it was going to be a close battle, but that's what I predicted, and it ended up not being that. But on Friday night, the new 12-team college football playoff opened up with its alluring feature, a postseason game hosted on campus. Indiana visiting in Notre Dame for the first round matchup, or I say the Battle of Indiana. Notre Dame's defense was rocking Friday night against Indiana, controlling the entire game and not giving up a touchdown until the issue was resolved late in the fourth quarter. Part of Indiana's game plan early was certainly to target Notre Dame freshman cornerback Leonard Moore. The Hoosiers left South Bend having given future Fighting Irish opponents a warning. Target Leonard Moore at your own risk. Because Indiana's game plan was clearly to target Leonard Moore. And you have to understand why they wanted to target Leonard Moore, because of the success USC had against the Notre Dame secondary 3 weeks ago. But when the true freshman was targeted, things didn't really go too well. Indiana quarterback Curtis Rourke, when targeting Leonard Moore on Friday night, was a paltry 1 for 7 passing, 17 yards, 2.4 yards per pass attempt with a 36.9 passer rating. What do you have to say about that, Jordan?
Well, they cruised through their whole schedule, Indiana, but they had a whole new thing coming when they got introduced to the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, it was it was pretty crazy. I mean, I for one thought it was going to come down to the Hog Mileys up front, the defensive line for Notre Dame, who had been dominant throughout the season, and the same with Indiana. They both were a microcosm of each other. Both want to run the ball, both want to have great defensive pressure on the quarterbacks, but only one team ended up really just having that surge in stopping the other team.
Yeah, Riley Leonard took the charge early. They couldn't really stop Riley Leonard in their offense. And by the time the half ended, they were already up by 2 possessions.
Yeah, in so many ways, this isn't the Notre Dame football program I spent so many of my developmental years watching. Yeah, if you want to understand why I'm a Notre Dame fan, I will just put it to you like this. There was one time there was a Notre Dame game on NBC. I watched it and been a fan ever since. You know, it hasn't exactly been one of those crazy stories where I ended up being a good Notre Dame fan, but you know, it is what it is. You can't choose the teams that you follow. They just miraculously come and reach out to you. Sometimes you wish that you were an Alabama fan, you know, from all those championships they've won over the years. But as it stands, Notre Dame fan. But getting back to it, Moore's fast rise speaks to that, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. It has been since January 1st of 1994 that Notre Dame has won a major postseason game before Friday night, when the Fighting Irish used a record-setting run by Jeremiah Love early to propel themselves to the first round college football playoff victory. Notre Dame's win was like the majority of the season, not overwhelming the Hoosiers offensively for the most part, but simply suffocating them defensively. Notre Dame's 27-17 victory advances the Irish to the Sugar Bowl, where they will play number 2 seed Georgia on New Year's Day night. But what a fitting end for Xavier Watts' career at Notre Dame Stadium. The senior had a major play early, intercepting Curtis Rourke at the Notre Dame 2-yard line on Indiana's second possession. One play later, Jeremiah Love dashed 98 yards to give the Irish the game's first lead. Now, Watts was outstanding throughout the night, being around the ball like he typically does and finishing with several key tackles. The interception was his 15th takeaway over the last 2 seasons, right? But Jeremiah Love's 98-yard touchdown run right after the Watts interception gave a lead. They wouldn't surrender. So you got to credit Love for taking advantage when given the opportunity, because it wasn't a good night running the ball otherwise for the Irish. You take out that 98-yard run, and Notre Dame just ran for 96 yards on the 33 attempts. It turns out that Indiana's defense was really good despite the record-setting dash.
Yeah, the Indiana defense has been impressive against the run all year, but that 98 rushing touchdown by Love really surged the Notre Dame offense to keep going. I don't know if they would have as many uh, points if he had not ran for that.
Yeah, we thought a couple of times going into these games this year that it was a chance, moving on to the wide receivers. The wide receivers for Notre Dame, they they haven't really had a number one wide receiver. We've had ended up having glimpses, and yes, I will say we a lot. I apologize. I know I'm not on the team, but back to it. Jordan Faison, he had a coming out. He had a coming out of party of sorts. Faison didn't play poorly, but his high point of the regular season was a 4-catch, 52-yard performance against Navy. For very early on, Faison was a focal point of Notre Dame's offensive attack on Friday night. He was the regular go-to guy on the key third downs all night, and he had been able to stretch about half yard more on his final reception, would have been rewarded with a touchdown. But moving on to Riley Leonard, he rebounded from an interception on his first pass attempt to complete 23 passes for 201 yards and had 2 total touchdowns in his final game at Notre Dame Stadium. Leonard spread the ball to 10 wide receivers, including wide receiver Jordan Faison, who set a career high with 7 receptions. Now, the Duke transfer and Alabama native, Leonard will continue his quest closer to home in the college football playoff quarterfinals against number 2 seed Georgia at the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans on January 1st. Notre Dame has lost 10 consecutive major bowl games since its last win in a marquee New Year's Day game, the 1994 Cotton Bowl. Just let that set in, guys. What do you think is going to be the keys to a Notre Dame victory, Jordan?
I think that what they did at the Indiana game, they need to do at their next game because their defense dominated the whole game. They successfully got to the quarterback. They did pretty well despite how good the Indiana offense is. But they need to get to the quarterback. We all know how good the opposing quarterback is going to be in that game. But also, Riley Leonard needs to carry the offense because, as you said, there's no real playmaker on the Notre Dame offense. It's kind of just split around between a few receivers. So they need to get started real early.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that's been out there all season was the fact that Riley Leonard has not passed for 250 yards all season long. He has always been under 250 yards. But the way it's looking, Carson Beck is not going to be playing in this game, and it's going to be Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton. Now, I'm sure everybody who follows my pages, saw that I posted a very untimely picture of Gunnar Stockton when he was going towards the end zone, and he just got lit up, right? Just laying there lifeless. It was not a sight to behold by any means. But he's likely going to be filling in for Carson Beck, who's still dealing with his injury. But just like they did to Indiana's Curtis Rourke on Friday, they're gonna have to harass that Gunner Stockton if they think they're going to have any chance whatsoever. Notre Dame's defense, which has carried the team much of the season, recorded 10 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks against Indiana and rarely let the Hoosiers operate on schedule. The Irish also need to replicate the offensive balance they showed against Indiana while being a bit more consistent on the ground. Removing Love's 98-yard touchdown. I know I said this, but I'm going to beat this horse till it's dead. Notre Dame had 96 net rushing yards on 34 carries. Notre Dame also must play cleaner on special teams after having a field goal attempt blocked and an onside kick recovered by Indiana late in the game. There's a reason why that game ended up being 27-17. Notre Dame let off that gas, and their defense for the last 2 minutes of that game did not play very well. But I am not going to do any predictions. We're going to save that for later in the week, guys, because that is the fun part of the podcast. But let's just go ahead and wrap things up on Notre Dame. I do think, it was a good win, and I understand everybody online is talking about how Indiana shouldn't have been there, Alabama should have been there. Well, let's have a little heart-to-heart, guys. There's a reason why Alabama wasn't there. There's a reason why Ole Miss wasn't there. And for everybody that wants to get on my social media and tell me that I'm wrong, well, here's the thing. Oklahoma beat the brakes off of Alabama. If not for that loss, Alabama would have been in the college football playoff. And let's go to Ole Miss. If they wouldn't have lost to Kentucky or to a 5-6 Florida team, take one of those losses out, they would have been in the college football playoff. But Lane Kiffin wants to go online and say that these games are really entertaining. I know he's being facetious, but still, it's the same. Like, I understand you're salty. We all get that you're salty. It's time for you to move on, dude. Focus on your bowl because nobody really cares that you're not in the college football playoff anymore. Yes, there were 2 games today that were, there was 1 game today that was a blowout. 1 game last night that was a blowout. Get over it. What do you got to say, Jordan?
Well, like you said, there's a reason Alabama and Ole Miss are not in the playoffs right now. And I've got to say, the teams that are in the playoffs, they've been dominating more than Ole Miss and Alabama have. They didn't lose to teams that are not even ranked, not even have a winning season. They've had some good games, but they haven't been as dominant as other teams in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on. The next day, and the next game was Penn State. My God. Okay. So I really just I had Penn State beating the brakes off of SMU. Just for particular reasons. I knew that SMU's quarterback, all right, I knew that he is turnover prone. And coming into this game, he is turnover prone. And he proved just that he's turnover prone even more. So this game really wasn't much of a matchup. And then of course, you have all the people chirping, saying, "Oh, well, Alabama, well, Ole Miss, well, they weren't in the college football playoff, so guess what? Maybe you should have 6 teams in the SEC in the college football playoff." Yeah, not really. You want to get the 12 best teams. 6 of the 12 best teams were not in the SEC, and if you're an SEC homer, well, yeah, just get over yourself because that's not how this works. If you want 6 SEC teams in the college football playoff, guess what? Sign a petition for it to go to 16 teams. That's the only way it's going to happen. But number 6 seed Penn State used 2 first-half interception returns, 4 touchdowns to jumpstart a 38-10 blowout of number 11 SMU. The Nittany Lions they're going to move on to meet number 3 seed Boise State in the playoff quarterfinal at the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. We will talk about that a little bit more later. But Penn State's offense struggled early on a windy, frigid day in Happy Valley, but 2 pick sixes by linebacker Dominic DeLuca and Tony Rojas off of Kevin Jennings gave the Nittany Lions a 14-0 lead into a game that turned into just a massive blowout soon after. But as we've already discussed, there are questions about the committee's choices. Much like Indiana, SMU is hearing from the chorus of voices labeling the Mustangs a fraud that didn't deserve its at-large playoff spot. And though there might be some flaws in the 12-team inaugural playoff format, SMU bid is not one of them. The Mustangs laid an egg against Penn State. There's no question about it. But a terrible performance doesn't negate the body of work that got them to this point. It just doesn't. Most teams have bad games. You'd hope that they wouldn't have a bad game in the college football playoff, but here we are. Years ago, Notre Dame had an undefeated season. Well, what happened? They had a bad game against a great team in the name of Alabama. That's what happened. And they ended up getting blown out. But Alabama had a bad game against Oklahoma. Ole Miss had one against Kentucky. And they had a really bad one against Florida. Miami had a bad game against Syracuse. SMU just happened to have a bad game in the first round of the college football playoff. It doesn't make them less deserving of that opportunity, though. But what it does do is prevent controversy. And that's what we have right now is controversy. What say you, Jordan?
There's going to be talks from the fans everywhere feeling that their team deserves the chance to be in the college football playoffs.
Yep.
But some of the teams that they will mention lost to teams that aren't even going to make it to the playoffs, don't even have a winning season, not ranked, a bunch of things. But these teams that are in the playoffs, they've been doing their thing all year. While these teams complaining, they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much else you can say about it. I mean, we could debate this topic, talk about this topic ad nauseum, but that's not why we're here. Let's just dig right into Penn State's defense. DeLuca's interception, like I said earlier, midway through the first quarter, immediately brought the whiteout crowd to life. And I just want to take a time out and talk about the whiteout. It is one of the greatest things in college football. This is why I've always said, and it's not because my team sucks in the NFL. It is strictly because the pageantry, the crowds, the tailgating. Yes, you have tailgating in the NFL. Don't get me wrong. But all of these combined into one atmosphere is just ridiculously electric. You saw last night in the Notre Dame game. You wouldn't see this in any other. And like if this game was broadcast on NBC, you hardly hear any of the noise coming from the crowd. But like I'm sure you've all seen these hype videos for Penn State, Ohio State, name the top team that you want, but you've seen all these hype tapes and the crowds are just electric. That's why college football is great. These games are why college football is great. But all right, I digress. Let's get back on topic. Rojas's interception return as he weaved his way through the SMU defense for a 59-yard score early in the second quarter was the play that signified that the route of the Mustangs was on. It's the first time since 1998 against Michigan State that the Nittany Lions returned 2 interceptions per touchdowns. Now you take those two interception returns for touchdowns, you're still looking at a route, and you're going to look for the same type of outcome here. But DeLuca added the team's third pick in the first half in what felt like a surreal outing for the defense that's been superb most of the season, but hit another level as Jennings and the Mustangs imploded. With the defense backed up at its own 19-yard line after the Nittany Lions inexplicably went for it and didn't convert on the 4th and 1. All right, let's just talk about that for a second. That 4th and 1, you had that first down, but you got a little greedy, Jennings. You can't do that when it comes to the college football playoff. You got to take what the defense is giving you. But they didn't get that 4th and 1, and DeLuca's second interception helped the team get out of a situation where points would have kept the door open for the Mustangs. But Penn State scored 21 points off of 3 takeaways in the first half alone, serving as an ideal bounce back performance after their 45-37 loss to unbeaten Oregon in the Big Ten title game. The Mustangs ultimately finished with 253 yards as the Nittany Lions racked up 11 tackles for loss, including the 3 sacks. What did you think about the performance from the Penn State defense?
I think they did the offense's job themselves. Like you said, 3 picks. The Jennings needed to do better because they're walking into this game. They have the Penn State fans going crazy all around the stadium. That's hard to play.
Yeah.
But Jennings throwing 2 pick sixes, 3 pick sixes was not help for SMU. They gave the points to Penn State.
Yeah, and in games like these where it's win and go home, you cannot give away points. And that's ultimately what they ended up doing. And it's not something that is going to help out your team in any form or fashion. But in reality, Penn State's defense was just stifling. If you take those turnovers away, I mean, SMU just couldn't get anything going whatsoever.
Yeah, they really didn't have to. They didn't have to pass the ball on Penn State's side. Like I said before, the defense did their job for them. They could have not got a touchdown on offense. They'd still be fine.
Yeah, but as we move on, obviously that Penn State defense was just nasty all day long, and SMU felt its effects. And the after effect of that was the criticisms from the entire college football nation feeling like they didn't deserve to be there. But the college football committee did what they thought was best, and it ended up being a blowout. And Lane Kiffin had to chime in on that one as well. But moving on, the Penn State offense can do better. Okay. There's a discourse surrounding whether or not SMU deserved to be there, and we can talk about that ad nauseum as well. But you got to give credit to Penn State for, like it's done all season, winning a game it's supposed to win. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and a buddy of mine from the Monty and Murdy college football show. If you're not following them, go ahead and do so because they post out pretty damn good content. But they said one thing in particular, and it was about Penn State. When Penn State is favored, they are very consistent. Well, they were favored in this game, and well, they walked into halftime with a 28-0 lead. And that's just a reminder at how dominant Penn State can be. And yes, SMU made a ton of mistakes, but Penn State's defense was relentless and the Nittany Lions took advantage. But there is still a lot to do for Penn State. If the offense hits a similar level that we saw in the Big Ten title game against Oregon when it had 523 total yards, then this team can't be dismissed as a national title contender. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they have Boise State next. Do we expect Boise State to come out and just demolish Penn State? Absolutely not. We're not going to expect that. I definitely do not expect that. But moving on to how the offense worked this game, Drew Aller, he wasn't spectacular. He was 13 to 22 for just 127 yards. It wasn't his greatest outing, obviously, as you know, the Nittany Lions leaned on the running game and the cold weather with a lead. But it also didn't matter because of what the defense was able to do. Nicholas Singleton carried the ball 14 times for 90 yards, and Katron Allen 11 carries for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns, including that 25-yarder that put Penn State up 21-0. Most importantly, Penn State didn't turn the ball over until the game was out of hand and Aller had already been relieved by freshman quarterback Ethan Grunkenmeyer. Jennings was not ready for the big time, though. Okay. I mean, really, what else is there to say? Jennings threw those 2 pick sixes to the Nittany Lions and gave them a 14-0 lead. He also missed a wide open SMU touchdown on 4th down on the Mustangs' opening drive and had a tipped interception inside Penn State's 10-yard line. It's no secret why Penn State had that lead at 28-0 at halftime. But for all of Jennings' ability this season, he has been turnover prone. He had 5 turnovers in a win against Duke and 2 first quarter turnovers against Clemson that put the Mustangs in a massive hole in the ACC title game. They were able to rally to beat Duke and tie the score against Clemson, but this wasn't Duke or Clemson, okay? This was an elite Penn State defense playing in front of 100,000 home fans.
Yeah, Jennings is a young quarterback. I expected him to make mistakes in this game. It's a huge game. Not a lot of teams get to go to the playoffs. And he definitely made his mistakes, but it's hard not to make mistakes against that Penn State defense. Because that defense was electric. Like, they did not allow anything in the first half. Those pick sixes really threw Jennings off.
Oh yeah, and in any football game, turnovers, it's going to be hard to recover, and especially when they're pick sixes real early. I mean, we can debate as much as we want about if he would have converted that 4th-and-1 touchdown pass, what could have been, but it is reality, and I actually wondered if SMU was going to turn to backup quarterback Preston Stone at some point in this game because of how bad Jennings was playing. Preston Stone was the starter last year, and the beginning of this year, Stone is in the transfer portal, but chose to stay with the team and prepare for the playoff. But SMU stuck with Jennings, the player who will be back next season. Jennings ended up finishing 20 of 36, 195 yards with 3 picks and 1 late touchdown in garbage time, and his running was largely a non-factor. And you can attribute that to Penn State just bottling him up. But it was obvious in this game that SMU was not ready for prime time. Shout out Deion Sanders. The Mustangs went 8-0 in their first ACC season with a roster that hasn't been able to take advantage of the Power Four conference boost for recruiting and transfers. SMU long said it needed a power conference invitation and it could win. It got a spot and it did so immediately. But the games against Clemson and Penn State were just a gentle reminder of the difference between being a top 20 team and being a top 5 team. The defense played hard and actually held up pretty well in the trenches against both, but on Saturday at Penn State, the offense did not. Jennings was constantly running for his life and making these bad decisions when he did so. I mean, there were plenty of times throughout this game where Jennings just looked like a chicken with his head cut off, like he just wanted to get out of the game, wanted nothing to do with it. And to have their season end on that note is it's just it's it's hard to say anything was close with that final score, but a competitive game was there to be had if it weren't for these early mistakes. Something that talented teams can learn from. Against the top tier of these teams, those mistakes turned what could be an upset chance into a blowout. SMU could get away with that against the AAC teams last year or a team like Duke this year, but not against a team like Penn State or Clemson. But up next, Penn State is going to be attempting to stop Ashton Jeanty. I'm going to let you take the front on this. What do you think is going to happen in that Fiesta Bowl matchup with Boise State?
Well, I think they stopped the run pretty well today, but they're going to have to do a lot more on Ashton Jeanty. I mean, he has one of the most impressive seasons running the ball in years.
It's been about a decade.
Yeah. But they're going to have to test Jeanty because he's been impressive all season. But Boise State hasn't played impressive teams, but when they played the Oregon Ducks, he went off for more 100 rushing yards. And we all know the Oregon Ducks have a good team. It's not easy to rush 100-plus yards against them.
It's not easy to go undefeated all season long either.
Their only loss was to the Oregon Ducks, so see how they do against Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, it will be the Penn State defense against the Heisman Trophy runner up in the Fiesta Bowl. I'm not going to get into that controversy of the Heisman Trophy either. I mean, all right, I'm going to say one thing, okay? And I've been saying this for weeks. The Heisman Trophy lost its credibility when Melvin Gordon did not win the Heisman with the stats that he put up, okay? To me, that's when it lost its credibility. Now it is nothing but a popularity trophy. Whoever is the most popular is going to win that trophy. And that's what happened. And if you saw any of the clips after the Heisman Trophy presentation, Jeanty was obviously a bit perturbed. But it is going to be this Penn State defense going up against Jeanty. It's basically going to come down to can a top 10 Nittany Lions defense that completely bottled up SMU repeat that performance against the best running back in football? Penn State has allowed roughly 100 rushing yards per game this season. Jeanty averages nearly double that and is just 131 yards shy of Barry Sanders' single season FBS rushing record. I know asterisk, he's played more games, whatever. Whichever side wins this heavyweight clash on the ground is going to surely have the upper hand.
Yeah, people can say what they want about Travis Hunter and how impressive his season was, but when you put up the numbers Ashton Genty has put up this season, he has to get that Heisman. I
It
don't.
just, there was a question raised to me about 3 weeks ago. If Ginty had 60 receptions, would he have won the Heisman? And my answer to that would have been no, because it would have taken away from the rush plays that he had throughout the season. So I don't even think if he would have had 60 receptions and 2,000 rushing yards, I still don't think he would have won because he didn't play two positions. Just saying. And also, just a touch on Hunter. Okay, I'm not a hater. He is a great talent, but honestly, he wasn't great at two positions. If he was great at his defensive back position, then why didn't he win the Jim Thorpe Award? Just saying. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the afternoon game of today, which was number 12 Clemson against number 5 Texas. Um, what did you come away with after this game, man?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I thought that Clemson could compete with Texas, but at the beginning, I really thought that because Clemson went down the field, got got 7, then Texas got 7. Clemson Clemson got stopped a number of times after that. They couldn't get anything started. They couldn't protect the quarterback. Klubnik was making some mistakes, but Texas took advantage of those mistakes. And Quinn Ewers looked great this game.
See, I wouldn't say he looked great, but I'll get into that a little bit. This was the first matchup between these national championship programs, which pitched the first game of the first round that was competitive well into the second half, with Clemson closing the gap to 7 points early in the fourth quarter. But Texas, they always had a response. The Longhorns finished with 292 yards rushing on the day. The formula for slowing Texas's offense has been cut and dried. Stop the run, and you can keep the Longhorns from lighting up the scoreboard. If Texas gets into a groove, then good luck. The Longhorns set the tone early, utilizing both Quintrevion Wisner and Jadon Blue to dice up this Clemson defense. Texas had 121 first half rushing yards, but the Tigers showed signs of being able to contain the run in the third quarter, holding Texas to just 3.1 yards per rush. But probably my key of the game was after the Tigers narrowed the Texas lead to just a touchdown, the Longhorns imposed their will, trusting their offensive line and letting Blue do the rest. His 77-yard touchdown run with 10:48 left to play gave Texas the breathing room they needed to stave off the Tigers rally. But the Longhorns' ground performance is all the more impressive when accounting for injuries they suffered up front. All right. Right tackle, Cam Williams, center, Jake Majors, both left the game in the second quarter with injuries. So that just proves to you how much depth this offensive line has. And they subbed in Trevor Gooseby at right tackle and Cole Hudson at left guard. That the group finished the way they did in spite of shifting personnel is it's got to be encouraging for Texas as it looks ahead to the quarterfinal. But Clemson's defense just could not hold up against the run. It may sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is just the fact that the Tigers entered Saturday with a questionable at best run defense that ranked number 74 in the nation and gave up an average of 150 and a half rushing yards per game on the ground. It only got worse for Clemson on Saturday against a bigger, stronger Texas team that had no problem picking up chunk plays, including that 77-yard run in the fourth quarter. But the Longhorns rushed for 148 yards in the first half alone, averaging 6.7 yards per rush on 22 carries. The 1-2 punch of Wisner and Blue was just too much for the Clemson defense that has struggled to set the edges all season, and they couldn't find a way to stop Texas downhill. What did you think about that? The rushing attack, that is, Jordan?
I think the rushing attack was. I thought it was pretty amazing because Clemson has a good defense, but like you said, they have their struggles against the rush attack. And they took advantage of that because both running backs combined for 256 rushing yards. And for two running backs to go off like that, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, but this entire rushing attack that we've been talking about, it opened up the passing game for Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, who had a 43-yard pass to Matthew Golden on the Longhorns' third drive that set them up for an eventual 16-yard touchdown run. Texas finished the first half with 289 yards of total offense, averaging 8.30 yards per play. On a night when Clemson knew the Longhorns' defense was going to be at their best it had seen all year, Sweeney and defensive coordinator Wes Goodwin were always going to need their own defense to counter Ewers in the Texas offense. But it couldn't hold up. But when it comes to Quinn Ewers, he was good enough. Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, he had a great start, but he was up and down from that point onward. He completed his first 8 passes with that streak broken on an interception, the result of receiver DeAndre Moore dropping a would-be completion. Ewers made no critical mistakes or didn't put the ball in harm's way unnecessarily. He even used his legs for a first down, a positive sign considering he's still working his way back from his ankle injury. But his line was unspectacular. 17 of 24 passing for 202 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. But he was good enough on a day when the run game carried the day. But Texas, they are going to be getting the Big 12 champ and star running back Cam Scatterbo next in Atlanta. Since losing October 19th at Cincinnati, a game played without injured quarterback Sam Leavitt, Arizona State has been in a roll. The Sun Devils won 6 in a row to win the Big 12 championship and captured the college football playoffs 4th seed. Now, this may or may not be another scenario where all of the fans in the college football world say to themselves, why were they seeded number 4 and why did they receive a bye? But we will find that out. But this Arizona State team, they have gotten better every week, but Texas is going to ultimately be their biggest test. Entering Saturday, the Longhorns boasted the nation's number 2 scoring defense, giving up 12.5 points per game, and its number 13 rushing defense, giving up 106.4 yards. The Sun Devils will counter with Cam Scatterbo, a first-team All-American who finished 5th in Heisman Trophy voting, even though he states that he is the best running back in the nation. Scatterbo thought he deserved better. He says he's the best running back in the country, and he will try to prove it on the biggest stage of his life. Arizona State, they have personnel issues, though. The Sun Devils won't have receiver Jordan Tyson, a third-team All-American who suffered a season-ending collarbone injury against rival Arizona on November 30th. In addition, safety Shamari Simmons is expected to miss the first half because of a targeting penalty that happened in the fourth quarter of the Big 12 championship game. But in this game, turnovers are going to be key. Texas is among the best at forcing them, as only Notre Dame and James Madison, yeah, I said James Madison, have forced more turnovers entering the playoff. But Arizona excelled with ball security, committing only 8 turnovers, fewer than every team but Vanderbilt. What do you think about this matchup against Arizona State, Jordan?
Well, as you said, Arizona State's running back was in the Heisman running at fifth. And since Arizona State is missing some pieces in the game, they're going to have to lean more on the running game. So if Texas can key on the rushing, I think they will blow by Arizona State. But the Texas offense is going to need to do their job too, because unless Texas's defense can get the points that Penn State got, I think they're going to have to do their job.
Yeah, I mean, Texas has an edge in big game experience, obviously. The Longhorns made last season's college football playoff while the Sun Devils picked to finish last in this season's Big 12. It almost seems like they're living in a fairy tale right now. But coincidentally, the last time Arizona State surprised in such a way unfolded in 2007 when the Sun Devils won 8 in a row to open the season, reaching the number 6 in the national polls. At 10-2, they met Texas in the Holiday Bowl. The Longhorns won that game in a rout, 52-34. Do you think that this game against Arizona State is going to be another rout?
I think it's going to be an interesting game because, like I said before, if they don't key in on that rushing game, it could be a high-scoring game because both sides have pretty good running backs. Texas got Wisner, they got Blue. Both dominated in today's game. But I think both teams are going to try to enforce the rushing game early.
Yeah. But let's move on to Ohio State and Tennessee. We obviously didn't watch the entire game. We stopped watching about after the third quarter when it was what 35-10. Um, yeah, that's really when we stopped watching. I was more surprised about this game than anything, really. Like I thought. So what was it about 3 weeks ago? Michigan faced off against Ohio State, and they basically gave the entire country a blueprint on how to beat Ohio State. But the problem in this game with Tennessee was the fact that their defense just couldn't stand up. Like they were just getting gashed when it came to big plays on, the passing. They just got completely demolished. Do you have anything to say about what we saw in this game, man?
Well, like you said, we didn't watch the full game, but I think I got all the information I needed because Ohio State started off really strong. They ended the drive with a 34-yard touchdown to their leading receiver. And I don't think they're going to have much problem passing the ball with the receivers they got on their team because they got Jeremiah Smith and they got Mbuka. Those are two top tier receivers that not a lot of corners can guard in college.
Yeah, like Igbuka, he's going to go in the draft, obviously, and he's going to help out any team, in the slot. But I don't know. This game was just it ended up being 42-17, and it's just like Tennessee did not have the defense that was going to stop them. And plus, you know, I thought their rushing attack was going to be better than they were since they have a pretty damn good running back on their team. But Nico Iamaleava, he rushed 20 times for 47 yards. Um, and he passed for 14 for 31 for 104 yards. Yeah, if you go on the other side, Ohio State, Will Howard, he was 24 of 29. One of those incompletions was a pick, and he passed for 311 yards. That was a 10.7 yards per play average. Um, but what I will say is Ohio State, they do have a good rushing attack, a good 1-2 punch. It hasn't really shown most of the season, but they rushed for 156 yards. You got Quinshawn Judkins, 10 carries for 34 yards, but Travion Henderson, 10 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. But when it came to the rushing offense for Tennessee, you thought something was gonna it was gonna be more evident with Dylan Sampson. Um, but he ended up with only 2 carries, and I believe he was injured in that game. But really, this game ultimately came down to, it was just Tennessee could not stop the route that was coming, you know. Um, but is there anything that you took away from this game?
Well, I saw that Tennessee couldn't get anything started. Their quarterback, I'm not even going to try to say his name. Um, he just couldn't get anything going because his O line just broke down during this game. I mean, Ohio State has great defense. Don't get me wrong, but he had no time in the pocket, had no time to develop the plays to get Tennessee's offense moving down the field. And I think that's the reason why they lost.
I mean, it just goes off of what I said in the last podcast. The defensive coordinator, Knowles, I think his name is. I had a feeling that he was going to be able to draw up anything against this Tennessee offense. There's a reason why the Ohio State defense is the number one defense in all of the nation. It's not a surprise. You know, their front seven is dominant, and we saw it. But Knowles, he's known for drawing up pressure without adding blitzers, and if he was adding blitzers into that, then you might have been able to get some passes to your tight ends or to your slot wide receivers. Um, but that wasn't the case. So this Ohio State team is going to be tough to beat for one reason and one reason only. And it's not because of their defense, it's because Ryan Day is the most desperate coach in all of college football right now. If he does not win a college football championship this season, with all of the money that was invested into this team in the offseason, I don't see how he is going to continue to have a run with Ohio State, especially when he continuously loses to Michigan. You lost to Michigan on a Michigan down year. And so at the end of the season, he's going to have to answer for that. But really, the bottom line, and back to this game, um, Dylan Sampson, he did injure his hamstring, and he'd been dealing with a hampered hamstring for since his last game. But it's just they did not have the weapons in order to go up against Ohio State. And when your defense can completely harass the quarterback game in, you know, all four quarters, it's just not going to be good for that team. And that's what we saw with that 42-17 defeat. But moving on, this is going to be a classic game. The Buckeyes going up against Oregon in the Rose Bowl on January 1st. And if many of you remember, the Ducks faced off against Ohio State on October 12th. And if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Will Howard, I'm a K-State guy, but Will Howard, I watched him play. When there is constant pressure, he will always do something that will screw things up. He is going to crumble under pressure. He did it with K-State, and all these K-State fans, say whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is this. There's a reason why he transferred. Why didn't he go into the NFL draft? Well, because he wasn't good enough, and he was going to end up being a 6th or 7th round pick. But we saw exactly what happens when Will Howard has the pressure on his shoulders against Oregon. He didn't pay attention to the clock. And then instead of doing what he needed to do, he ran down the field and the clock expired. And you didn't even get to attempt to take that field goal to win that game. So, me personally, I do not have any faith whatsoever that if the game comes down to a single possession or anything like that, Will Howard is not going to come out and just be completely clutch. He is not going to channel his inner Tom Brady. The one thing that he has going for him is the fact that he is on Ohio State. He has multiple weapons. He has a dual running back rushing attack. Okay. And then you'll have Agbuka. And then you have multiple other wide receivers. And you got a pretty damn good tight end. Your offensive line is pretty elite. And then, not just that, you have the number one defense in the nation. There's a reason why he transferred to Ohio State. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't doing it for the money. He was doing it so that he could make himself look good so he could be a high draft pick. But guess what? You're still not going to be a high draft pick.
Yeah, he was not going to be drafted that high. He was not going to be a first-round quarterback. That year that he was going to go in the draft, there was a lot of quarterbacks that were going to be taken over him. But he definitely went to Ohio State to expand his draft stock. But like you said, if he struggles early against Oregon, I don't know how Ohio State's going to win the game, because we all saw that Oregon Penn State game. 2 top-tier defenses, and none of them could stop either team.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it was 40 points back-to-back.
Yeah. But this game going up next against Oregon. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the most watched game of all of the quarterfinal games. Um, but it's going to be pretty wild. Like you have Oregon, who they themselves have invested a ton of money in their team, and it's just I don't know. It's it's going to come down to one possession. I have a feeling, but I would have to say one probably key matchup is going to be Jeremiah Smith. Um, he just continues to prove that these freshmen wide receivers that come in like Ryan Williams for Alabama and now Jeremiah Smith with Ohio State, they're just at a completely different level. Um, he had 2 touchdowns in this game, and it's just his second touchdown was a 22-yard catch for a score on it's just a simple route, but he made a nice adjustment over his shoulder and beating Tennessee quarterback Jermon McCoy in the process. And it's just like if Ohio State plays their game and Oregon plays their game, like I don't know who's gonna win, but it's going to be insanely fun to watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good game, but I think both defenses are gonna have to show up because they're two top tier defenses. Both got great teams, great offenses, and I see Jeremiah Smith getting most of the targets that game. I'm sure Howard's gonna target Egbuka, but Jeremiah Smith is his main target. And Jeremiah Smith is an insane playmaker off of just basic routes.
Yeah. And it's not like they're going to be really missing a step um, next season because they got like the number one or number two quarterback in all the nation coming to Ohio State. But let's touch on this Chiefs Texans game that we watched earlier today. Um, what did you walk away thinking about in this game?
Well, the way I walked away was I wasn't sure if Mahomes was gonna run the ball at all. I
Yeah.
didn't think he was gonna get out of the pocket. Well, I did. I didn't think he was gonna get out of the pocket, but just to throw the ball away. But he ended up rushing for 25 yards to get a touchdown, running over a defender. He is he does not care about his injury. He
No.
just he showed me that he can make plays, but I saw him targeting D Hop a lot, and D Hop's getting up there in age, but he
Yep.
still got the hands he did when he was playing back at Houston. I thought it was really impressive.
He actually had a pretty good game. Um, Mahomes did. 260 passing yards, 28 of his 41 attempts, but he only had one touchdown pass, which was thrown to Worthy, who ended up catching 7 balls for 65 yards. So I've been saying this for a couple weeks, Worthy has officially busted through that rookie wall. But you had Kareem Hunt run for 55 yards on 11 attempts, scoring on 1 touchdown. It was just another one of those games where the Chiefs did what they needed to do. They did just enough to win the game. That's that is this team in a nutshell for the entire year. But I did like the fact that Hollywood Brown was back and he was getting acclimated with the offense. Um, he did have some catches and he was helping throughout the game, and that's only going to help them. Obviously, Rasheed Rice is not coming back this season, but they needed another weapon in the offense attack because say what you want about Travis Kelsey, but in my personal opinion, Travis Kelsey, he's lost a step. Okay. And whether it be him getting double covered or not being as crisp on his routes or just not getting open. They needed another guy to take that pressure off of him, and that's what Hollywood Brown is going to be able to do.
Yeah, they needed Travis Kelsey because Rasheed Rice is a huge factor in Mahomes' offense. But I did see Travis Kelsey make a few plays. He's he's always been good on third downs, getting open. But I saw him drop a pass early in the game that he probably should have caught, but he recovered from that, converting a third down. I think their third drive that led to a touchdown. But yeah, I think he's not as good as he used to be. Of course, he's getting older, but I think he should have contributed a little more.
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Worthy led the way with the 7 receptions, 65 yards, but you had Hollywood Brown. He chimed in 5 receptions, 45 yards. He ended up having 8 targets, which kind of surprised me. I thought they were going to ease him into the offense a little bit, but I, I, I guess Patrick Mahomes doesn't know how to ease anybody into the offense, especially himself with his injury that who is working with. I would not to I would not want to be his high ankle sprain at this moment in time. But Travis Kelsey, he had 5 receptions for 30 yards. It's nothing to write home to your mom about. He had 7 targets. But Xavier Worthy, he is ultimately right now with his 11 targets. It is looking like he's their number one guy. Um, what just like you said, DeAndre Hopkins, 4 receptions, 37 yards. He's older, but you know this this defense is just this defense is going to be holding it down for this offense. Um, but one thing that is concerning is the fact that they lost Chris Jones. He got injured, and that is a big part of this defense. And so we're gonna have to see how that affects them because I know on Christmas Day they are going to be playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so we're gonna want to know what's going on within that matchup because Patrick Mahomes against that Steelers defense, T.J. Watt, it ain't easy, and I could actually see the Steelers coming out on top in this game.
Yeah, the Steelers made a huge improvement from last season. I didn't know if they would do too good this season having Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson isn't in his prime anymore, but they have surprised me with those 10 wins.
Oh yeah,
But I think their defense have carried them along the way. Of course, Watt, but they also got Hayward that made plays today in that Ravens game. I think Mahomes' O line is gonna have to protect him because if he gets hit wrong one time, he's out of the game because he had the ankle injury. He get hit if he gets hit one more time, then I think he could be out for the season or he could be out for a game.
Yeah, it really just depends on what Buffalo does right now because I ultimately think that the only reason why Kansas City isn't sitting their starters, they may start sitting them next week. Um, but it really just depends on what the Bills do because it's a battle for the number one seed. Kansas City and Buffalo, they're ultimately going to play again. I believe that with 100% assurance. But the Bills, they have a pretty easy schedule um, closing out the season. They got the Patriots, the Jets, and then the Patriots again. So I'm pretty sure you can count those all as wins unless something catastrophic happens. But the Chiefs, they got the Steelers next, and they got the Broncos. Like I don't know, those are two games that aren't 100% winnable. Um, so we're gonna have to, and plus, the Chiefs they're playing in 4 days. So they're say what you want about the NFL and college football, but you're not playing two games in 5 days when you're in college football. It just doesn't happen. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Who do you think's going to end up in the with that number one seed?
Well, it really depends because we've seen teams that look like they're going to have the number one seed play a team with 2, 3 wins and they lose. You never know what's going to happen in an NFL game. But if the Bills come on top with their easy schedule, I think they could come up with um, that free bye week. That's really helpful for a team.
Yeah,
That rest week. But I don't know. Chiefs could surprise me with this hard schedule, but they're playing 2 playoff contenders next, so they're gonna have to work.
yep. All right, let's go ahead and close down this episode. But if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you are watching, we are streaming everywhere right now. We are on YouTube, Twitch, X, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're absolutely everywhere. And if you're watching this episode, we highly appreciate it. But give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us pop in a big way. Everything is free here. Um, leave a comment below and comment what you liked of the podcast, what you didn't like of the podcast. Maybe you want us to talk about the Steelers in our next live stream. But yeah, do that. So thank you for doing that and follow us all on social media. At Hot Zone Sports, join the page that is meant for you because this is truly why we do things for the people. Subscribe to that YouTube channel, click that notification button, and have a blessed weekend and enjoy that NFL football tomorrow.